Airbnb is supposed to be about trust. You book a place, show up, and expect a safe, comfortable stay. But what happens when that trust is shattered? From deadly fires and hidden cameras to drug labs and cold-blooded murderers, some Airbnb stays have turned into absolute nightmares. And guess what? These aren't just horror stories. They really happened. So buckle up, because after this, you might think twice before booking your next stay. Daniel and Jocelyn Mirando's home turned into a meth lab. Picture this. You rent out your home on Airbnb for a quick getaway, thinking it's just another easy booking. The guests check in, you head off on your trip, and everything seems fine. Until you check your security cameras. At first, it's nothing major. A few guys unloading bags, carrying in some fans, but then you notice the bags aren't suitcases. They're huge, stuffed with something that definitely isn't clothing. Then the fans, industrial-sized, pointed at your kitchen. That's when it clicks. This isn't a normal Airbnb stay. These people aren't just tourists. They've turned your house into a full-blown meth lab. That's exactly what happened to Daniel and Jocelyn Mirando in Omaha, Nebraska. In early December 2023, they booked an 11-day stay for a guest, expecting nothing out of the ordinary. But when unregistered visitors started showing up at their home in the middle of the night, they got suspicious. Through their Ring cameras, they watched as a group of men hauled in bags of unknown substances, cooking pots, and what looked like chemistry equipment. Then came the fans, strategically set up all over the house because, as it turns out, that's exactly how you ventilate a meth lab. Panic set in. Jocelyn immediately messaged the guests, reminding him that extra visitors weren't allowed. No response. The men kept coming. That's when the Mirandos called the police. Omaha authorities quickly launched an undercover surveillance operation, tracking the movements of the renters. After spotting drug residue on one of the men leaving the house, the cops pulled him over. K-9 units sipped out the drugs immediately. That was all they needed. They got a warrant and raided the property. What they found was a disaster. Their once normal home had been turned into a full-scale meth production site. In just a few days, the renters had allegedly cooked over 100 pounds of meth. The kitchen was unrecognizable, covered in chemical residue. The air inside was thick with toxic fumes. Every surface, from countertops to furniture, was contaminated. Even their daughter's bedroom had been used to dry the meth. The entire house was destroyed. These men were arrested on the spot for manufacturing methamphetamine, possession with intent to distribute, and reckless endangerment. But for the Medranos, the damage was already done. Their home was uninhabitable. Every single thing inside, furniture, clothing, appliances, even the walls, was now a hazardous mess, requiring a $26,000 decontamination process just to make it livable again. Airbnb responded fast, banning the guests from the platform and offering financial assistance through the Air Cover Host Protection Program, which covers up to $3 million in damages. A company spokesperson released a statement saying, "The reported criminal activity has no place on Airbnb, and we have removed the guests from the platform. We are supporting the impacted hosts and stand ready to assist the Omaha Police Department with their investigation." But let's be real. No amount of money can erase the nightmare the Medranos went through. They trusted a platform designed to connect hosts with travelers, only to have their own home turned into a drug lab. Now, instead of enjoying their trip, they're homeless, living with friends, and trying to figure out how to rebuild their lives from the ground up. And the scariest part? This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and it sure as hell won't be the last. Migrant admits he strangled a woman on her 21st birthday in upstate New York, Airbnb. It was supposed to be a celebration. Jocelyn Johanna Talkiza had just turned 21 years old, and to mark the milestone, she booked an Airbnb in Syracuse, New York, planning to catch up with an old friend from Ecuador. It should have been a night of laughter, memories, and maybe a few drinks. But instead, she spent her last hours inside that rental because the person she met up with, Johan Moises Sheka Gosiaibas, had other plans, and by the end of the night, she was dead. Surveillance footage from June 18, 2024, showed Jocelyn and John arriving at the Airbnb together at around 4:30 p.m. The two had a history. Both were Ecuadorian nationals who had illegally crossed into the U.S., looking for better lives. Jocelyn had fled an abusive relationship, hoping for a fresh start. John's past was more of a mystery. What is clear is that sometime that evening, things took a dark turn. Inside the Airbnb, John strangled Jocelyn with a ligature. No argument, no warning, just cold-blooded murder. By the time she realized she was in danger, it was already too late. The next time cameras picked up John, he wasn't walking in with her. He was walking out, carrying her lifeless body over his shoulder. And here's the chilling part. As he walked through the streets of Syracuse with her body, a police cruiser drove right past him. They had no idea that just feet away, he was carrying the woman he had just killed. He dumped her in Lincoln Park, hastily burying her in a shallow grave before disappearing into the night. For days, nobody knew what had happened to Jocelyn. Friends and family were left wondering where she had gone. And then, out of nowhere, John walked into a police station and turned himself in. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Either way, he confessed. He told authorities exactly where to find Jocelyn's body, leading them straight to Lincoln Park. By January 2025, John had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and concealing a corpse. His fate was sealed. His sentencing is set for February 14, 2025, Valentine's Day, and instead of love, he'll be getting 22 years to life in prison. Jocelyn thought she was meeting up with an old friend. She thought she was celebrating her birthday. Instead, she walked into a death trap. And the scariest part, it could happen to anyone. Horrendous shipping. There was loud music, the house was packed, and the drinks were flowed. It was Halloween night 2019. What started as a low-key get-together inside a 4,000-square-foot mansion in Orinda, California, quickly turned into a full-blown party. Hundreds of people showed up, crammed inside a luxury Airbnb rental that, according to the listing, strictly prohibited parties. But this just wasn't any party. It was an Airbnb mansion party advertised all over Instagram and Snapchat. What nobody knew was that before the night was over, 5 people would be dead, gunshots would shatter the music, and the house would turn into a bloodbath. You see, the home was booked by a woman who told the owner she needed a quiet place for her family to escape the California wildfires. She said her relatives had asthma and needed fresh air. The host agreed, but with one clear rule: no parties. But by 9:19 p.m., the complaints started rolling in. Neighbors saw the crowd growing, cars pulling up, strangers flooding inside, music shaking the walls. The homeowner, monitoring his Ring camera, saw exactly what was happening. He messaged the renter. No response. He called Airbnb. Before they could do anything, it was already too late. At 10:50 p.m., the first gunshot rang out. Then another. Then another. The chaos exploded. People trampled over each other, screaming, running, ducking behind furniture. Some bolted out the front door, jumping over fences to escape. The ones who couldn't move fast enough, they were caught in the crossfire. When the police arrived, they found bodies on the floor, blood pooling on the tile, and shell casings scattered everywhere. 5 people were dead. Omar Taylor, 24. Tyron Farley, 22. Ramzan Hill Jr., 23. Javin County, 29. Oceana Tompkins, 19. Others were rushed to the hospital, some barely clinging to life. Then came the investigation, a messy, frustrating, dead-end case. Police arrested multiple people but had to let them go due to lack of evidence. Witnesses refused to cooperate. Too many people, too much chaos. The shooters were still unknown and the motives were still unclear. The fallout was immediate. Airbnb panicked. The company announced a ban on party houses, promising stricter screening, emergency response teams, and account suspensions for rule breakers. But for the families of the victims, it wasn't enough. 5 people went out that night expecting a party. Instead, they left in body bags, and the scariest part, the case is still unsolved. 2023 Old Montreal Fire. The fire started in the dead of night, March 16, 2023. While most of Old Montreal slept, flames were tearing through a century-old building in the heart of the city. Inside, 22 people were trapped, scrambling in the darkness, trying to find a way out, but for 7 of them, there was no escape. As the fire raged, it became clear this wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a disaster waiting to happen. You see, the edifice William Watson Ogilvy building had been around since the 1890s, a historic landmark repurposed into a mix of residential units and Airbnb rentals. Some guests that night weren't even supposed to be there. Short-term rentals were illegal in that part of Old Montreal, but landlords ignored the law, and Airbnb let it slide. Guests checked in, paid their money, and never knew what kind of death trap they were walking into. Inside one of those Airbnbs, 18-year-old Charlie LaCroix frantically called 911. She was trapped. No fire escape, no windows, nowhere to go. She begged for help. Dispatchers told her to stay calm, but there was nothing they could do. The line went dead. By the time the firefighters gained control, it was too late. 7 people were found burned, suffocated, and beyond saving. Some were travelers, some were locals. None of them should have died that night. Investigators started digging. What they found was infuriating. The building's safety violations had been reported years earlier. In 2018, the fire department flagged issues: blocked fire escapes, missing smoke detectors, and unsafe layouts. And nothing changed. Worse, Airbnb guests had complained about safety concerns. One person in 2022 even reported that their window had been glued shut. Glued shut. But Airbnb never removed the listing. Then came the final bombshell: arson. Montreal police discovered traces of accelerants, meaning someone deliberately started the fire. But even if they hadn't, this was a disaster waiting to happen. The property owner, Emily Haim Benamor, claimed he had no idea illegal Airbnbs were running inside his building, but everyone else knew. The backlash was instant. Quebec passed Bill 25, forcing Airbnb and other short-term rental companies to verify every listing before they could go live. No permit, no rental. Airbnb, now in full damage control mode, swore it would start cracking down on illegal listings, something that should have been done years ago. But for the families of 7 victims, no new law will bring them back. The Airbnb host who secretly filmed his guests. In the summer of 2022, 4 women rented an apartment in Santander, Cantabria, seeking a pleasant stay in the coastal city. Unbeknownst to them, the 35-year-old landlord had sinister intentions. Prior to their arrival, he had installed 4 hidden cameras, 2 in the bathroom and 2 in one of the bedrooms, strategically positioned to capture the most private moments of his guests. Over the course of their stay, the landlord recorded 26 videos, capturing the women in various states of undress and engaging in personal activities. He monitored these recordings remotely, invading their privacy in the most disgusting manner. His plan was revealed when he attempted to retrieve the hidden devices. Late one night, he entered the apartment without the tenant's permission, using a key he had retained. Intending to collect the incriminating evidence, he was caught off guard when the women returned unexpectedly. They discovered him hiding in a room that had been excluded from their rental agreement. Alarmed and suspicious, they confronted him, leading to his hasty departure. The women reported the incident to the local authorities, who promptly arrested the landlord. Upon searching his mobile phone, police found 26 illicit videos, confirming the tenant's worst fears. In court, the landlord confessed to his actions. He was convicted on 4 counts of violating privacy and 1 count of trespassing. The court sentenced him to 2 years in prison and imposed a fine of 1,080 euros. Additionally, he was ordered to pay 12,000 euros in damages to the victims and prohibited from approaching or communicating with them for nearly 4 years.